in the last, say, 2 months, quite a few emails from people in the RAF just saying I'm a nun with the truth, or to use the term loosely. We said, I know.
Pilot is obvious, the pilot, isn't it?
Well, and that's exactly. Other public meetings, saying working working forces and spreading the film loose change.
You had a question?
Dino, last question,
the brick wall that I find in my research, just one little hole just drives me mad, is the passengers on all of them planes. Yeah, I don't ever see anything about the family members or how successful have you been in even interviewing alleged members who had family
about that guy whose kid, you speculated that the kid might have. He might have said, no, Mark Bingham said there's a weird phone call. You know the guy I'm talking about? He said, oh, I'd go die or something. They didn't like that.
How successful have you been doing? Speaking to meeting people like Mark?
No, I hear you.
He sent his kid to his death.
Out of all the flights that I've heard the most from, when it comes to relatives, Flight 93. I've heard from a friend of Mark Bingham. I've heard of relatives of Elizabeth Wino. I've heard from tons of relatives of the survivors of the victims of Flight 93.
What's their reaction?
What are they saying?
What are they saying?
I support
generally.
you.
Support?
I support you, yeah. Mark Bingham's friend, totally supports what we're doing. Lauren Grant
what are they saying about what actually happened?
Well, they just said, I have questions about what happened. I feel they usually see our movie. They see our movie, they come to our site.
That's amazing.
Because they clicked the free DVD link, because we had that message right up our site. We'll send a free DVD to anybody who was affected by 9/11.
Sure.
We get all kinds of emails from people. Relatives from Flight 93 are, like I said, are in the majority. And again, coming back to your question, I've really only heard from relatives and friends of victims of Flight 93.
Yeah,
I've heard from a couple from Flight 77. I've talked to maybe one or two from 11 and 175. That's a really tough area, man. I mean, I feel that all those people are dead. I feel they died a tragic death. As to where and when, I don't know. I definitely don't think the second plane was Flight 175. Just because if you look at any United Airlines plane, if you look at United 175, you look at the pictures of it before it was destroyed, it's got a blue underbelly. You look at the footage of the second plane, it's gray. The whole plane is gray. So until someone can explain to me why a camera would turn blue underside into gray, that's something that to me is suspicious. I'm certainly not going to get up on TV and say that on Fox. But personally, I've got a big problem with that. I don't think that United Airlines Flight 175 is the plane that struck the South Tower. Someone's going to take that out of context and say, I thought it was no planes. No, I don't think that's true at all.
I already did that.
It's already up on YouTube.
All right, brilliant.
That's,
one last question then.
I was just wondering how you're dealing with
an answer.
The flashes that appear on different camera angles. I'm not sure if it's dealt with in Loose Change. It hasn't been on.
It was in the second one.
Sorry.
No, it was in the first one. I'm sorry. It was in the first one. We took it out of the second one because that was one of the things we got attacked for. When we released Loose Change 1, we were like, I liked a lot of the things you say, but I really don't understand what you were getting at with the whole pod flash thing, or I can't really accept it, or I don't understand. The main thing that I got was I don't understand what you're getting at there. I still feel that it's a legitimate avenue of research. As I just said, I don't think that we've been told 100% truth about what happened, but that doesn't mean that I exclusively believe that holograms hit the building or whatever. It's one of those things, just like when we went from the second edition to the final cut, we had to make decisions about what we would put in and what we wouldn't. It's the same thing that happened from Loose Change 1 to Loose Change 2. It's like, all right, well, let's scrap the whole pod flash thing and figure out a different way to introduce the film. Again, I feel it's a legitimate avenue of research. I don't discredit Dave Von Kleist or Phil Jahan or the research they've done. I just don't feel it's the kind of thing that should be on the forefront.
Because also it's not just a question of how much evidence there is, but how much noise and babble it can generate amongst skeptics.
Yeah.
Because certain things you might have the evidence on your side, but the subject is such that the skeptics in an interview or debate can generate a lot of confusing noise and babble.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like
even if they hadn't got the evidence.
For me personally, who's had to deal with this kind of stuff for a long time.
Flashes, they can do that.
No, exactly. There's things I'm going to bring up, and there's things that aren't. Just because I've had to go to events, I've had to go to radio shows, I've had to do hundreds of events. I know what works and I know what doesn't.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. Is I know how I can convince people, and I know how I can get people to be like, well, this guy's probably crazy. That's the bottom line.
I think they've just got better. I think basically what we're dealing with is mafia-type racketeers who've taken over the US state, And like the mafia, they don't bother to murder people like you. They murder witnesses, you know, and the guys who are actually the witnesses. I would be very worried about the air traffic controllers. You know, if I was an air traffic controller that day, I think they've probably got some very interesting things to say. And I would be very nervous about interviewing or persuading them to go public, because then I think they probably would end up in car crashes.
Yeah.
You know, it's the guys that are the witnesses who they, you know, that was the thing about Kennedy, it was the trail of possible witnesses. It wasn't, I don't think any investigative journalist got murdered in connection with the Kennedy. It was the witnesses. It's the guys that will go into court. Because these guys know that the thing these guys fear above all is the power of the law, the power of legal investigation and prosecutors and them going to jail. That's what they're worried about. And people like us are not witnesses. We have no standing in a court. We're just essentially speculators. What they're worried about, and I think what we should be very careful to protect, are any witnesses who might start speaking out. And Stanley, I'd be interested to see what you think of Stanley Hilton and his activities. But you know,
I haven't heard anything from him for years.
I haven't either.
The guy fell right off the radar.
He did, yeah. But you know, this was a guy who came out and he said, you know, I'm a Republican lawyer. I don't believe this story, and I've got a whole lot of witnesses. And apropos of what you were saying, Dylan, about the courts, Stanley Hilton actually did take a case, and it was quashed by the judge on grounds of sovereign immunity. In other words, that the president can do anything he likes. You know, that judge was not prepared to challenge the power of the United States president in court to commit an alleged conspiracy to murder. That was quite an interesting finding in itself. But Stanley Hilton said, you know, I have got quite a lot of witnesses who will only testify under oath. They're not going to talk to Dylan or Ian Henshall or Tim or anybody else. They're only going to talk to a court or to the Congress under oath with the protection of the law. And until such an investigation takes place, there won't be any witnesses if they've got any sense, and there won't be any deaths. And when that investigation is pending, that is the time that I think we should be very, very protective of the air traffic controllers, of the guys in the Pentagon, of the guys in the FBI who were told to not investigate the 9/11 hijackers even when they were suspicious of them, and so on. That's, yeah.
How do we protect them?
Yeah. We just, well, we don't publicise them. I think, you know, I believe that my phones are tapped, not because anybody's going to get me, but because and Dylan's phones are tapped, because they want to catch some poor little guy who phones up and says, I was in the air traffic control room that day, and I've got some very devastating information. And I just hope that nobody like that phones me up. Or if they do, they're very, very careful about identifying themselves, because that's what they're after. That's the choke point. The choke point is the witnesses and the mainstream media. And I've been on quite a few BBC radio interviews with my book, and always they ask me, either on or off air, have you been threatened? Which to me indicates that they're worried about being threatened. And I think, you know, like the editor of Newsnight probably has been threatened. The editor of the BBC News probably has been threatened. But guys like us, you know, until we can get on to, you know, why threaten us? You know.
Put it straight on YouTube. They got something to say, stick it on straight on YouTube.
That's what they can't cope with.
Well, that's it.
And they're taking measures to try and stop that happening. And you know, and that's their main attack, is to try and kill the internet.
Let's take a couple more questions. And we'll wrap it up. Paul, and one more. Any more questions? All right, fair enough. Paul.
Very quickly, two quick ones. When you're dealing with the BBC.